Today we meditate on God's love and another aspect of God's love. Jesus says, love your enemies. In Matthew 5, verses 43 and 44, these are the words of Jesus. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your neighbor and love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. What a command! Not just neighbor, but also your enemies, those that are persecuting you. This is Jesus' way of love. And he set example by himself in his own life. In 1 Peter chapter 3, we read, this is on family relationships and a lot of conflicts. And each one doesn't like to submit and give in. Say, okay, you can do it your way. My way is okay. We are ego. And so there are this conflict. So addressing that, important of submitting to one another in any relationship, Jesus gives us, Peter mentions Jesus' own example. He says, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges rightly. And who was this? He committed no sin, no deceit was found in his mouth, and still he was tortured, he was scourged, beaten, bleeding, spat upon, kicked, dragged, and finally with curses they crucified him on that cross. Why? Not because of anything wrong he had done, but because your sin and my sin. Jesus showed. And the first word on the cross, as Jesus hung there, you know what it was? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What a prayer! Asking forgiveness for the very ones who are persecuting, nailing him, doing all kinds of torture to him. And it is forgive them. They know not what they are doing. You and I call ourselves Christ's followers, God's children. Do we see, others see this image of extending our love even to those who think? And how is it to your credit, Peter asked, if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. And he goes on to add, to this you are called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. How difficult is our human nature to yield, to give in, to submit to one another in any relationship. But as his followers and God's children, that's what we are asked to do. I remember a story of Gladys and Graham Staines in our own country, state of Orissa. Remember, they were working sacrificially for years among the lepers. And there they murdered in cold blood Visitor Graham and his son. They were butchered and murdered. And you know what Gladys, his wife's response to that? There was no bitterness to God. She never asked, Lord, we have done so much service for you now, why should this happen to us? Nor did she question or accuse the murderers for being ungrateful for all the work that they have done, served them. No. She openly, publicly declared, I forgive the murderers of my husband and my son. That is commendable to God. or she was able to extend that forgiveness of Christ to these murderers. And today too, I read of persecutions in different places. And I read of those who are victims and persecuted, offering tea and snacks to their persecutors. That is the love of Christ extended to our enemies. I would like to conclude with this. Jesus faced grave injustice and with sacrifice. Through prayer and forgiveness in our hearts, let us go forth to conquer injustice and evil in our time by the courage not to demand vengeance, but rather repay injury with blessing and hate with love. Jesus' way is different from the world's way.